continuing where I left off, this is the Ottoman Empire. So not much is different. There's the coaster, obviously. We got our infantry, our out-of-box infantry, artillery, transports, submarines, cruisers, dreadnoughts, fighters, and tanks. But we also have, these are trucks that I painted with Rust-Oleum Lagoon is what I painted. And it's not exact, but it's pretty dang close. And I know I've asked a few people, and this is what they, when they're painting Turkey or Ottoman pieces, this is what they go with, and this is about as close as you're going to get. It's Rust-Oleum Lagoon. And again, like the British pieces, because it's Rust-Oleum, when I use a Rust-Oleum clear coat, for some reason there are random crazing issues. So I have gotten relatively lucky with the Ottoman pieces. These are bombers, Ottoman bombers that I painted. And these are Risk Cavalry, again, Risk Cavalry. Some of you might ask, well, why not camels? Because that's probably more appropriate. For that niche of a question, just consider cavalry and camels to be the same. They're essentially the same thing for the simplicity of the game. So, but these are the closest you can get to. These are not closest, but these match pretty closely overall. Little different, but they're not going to be confused. They're not really going to be confused with anything else. So that's what I used for my cavalry for the Ottomans. Again, here are the bombers, and we got the. Here are the bombers, and we have the out-of-box fighters. Now I do use the out-of-box 1914 tanks for the Ottomans. And yes, the Ottomans had no tanks in the war, but here are some HBG ones. They had no tanks in the war and weren't really developing any of them, but theoretically, if they did have any tanks, or if they had gotten possession of any tanks, they would probably be captured British tanks. So that's why I went with these Mark IVs, because I thought that would be appropriate. They just would be captured British tanks, theoretically. I know some people just go with A7Vs for the central powers across the board, and that's fine too. And then of course here we have the Ottoman task force markers that I've chosen to use. There's not a lot of options for Ottomans for task force markers, but they do have, HBG does have these nice rings that match close enough. They're turquoise, not really going to be confused with anything else, I think. And of course we have the Ottoman roundels, which still work as Turkish roundels today. Because it's essentially, it's the same flag. So that's the Ottomans. And then moving on to the Italians. Again, same thing, got the coaster, the HBG coaster for Italy. And then we have the out-of-box 1914 units. Again, this is just for my game. You know, 1914 is out of print. I realize it's difficult to get a hold of these and not pay an exorbitant amount of money for just pieces. But this is what I have, and this is what I will be using in our game. So we got the out-of-box Italian infantry, artillery, transport subs. Again, the standard naval units and fighters. But we do have Italian trucks. These are Shapeways trucks that I use. And then we have HBG cavalry, technically listed as Japanese cavalry, but they're close enough in color that they work for 1914 Italy as well. So just a little comparison. A little darker, but I mean it's close enough, you know. You're not going to get it exact if you paint. Now, speaking of painting, here are some Italian bombers. Sorry, here's the Italian bombers that I made. Again, magnetized. Now, this is a Rust-Oleum color. It is cinnamon, I believe. And here you can see that crazing issue I was talking about. So when I used a Rust-Oleum clear coat, for some reason on Tamiya paints, there's no crazing issue. But when I use a Rust-Oleum clear coat on Rust-Oleum paint, it's a crapshoot as to whether or not this happens. So if you look at it in detail, the light is making it pop right now. But if you look at it in detail, that Rust-Oleum, that's because of the Rust-Oleum paint reacting with the Rust-Oleum clear coat, which you would think, if it's the same brand, you would think that that wouldn't happen, but it does for some reason. So some of these are better than others, but yeah, this is the Italian bomber that HBG sells. And then these are the Italian tanks. Again, also the HBG sells. Now, I have a bunch of these because I got some HBG ones, but I also did... HBG had some Shapeways pieces up for sale at some point, and so they were just HBG... the HBG store on Shapeways, they were those pieces, they were just white, and I painted them. And then I did some more once they did the official HBG 3D printed piece. So I'm not sure how to tell them apart. They're very close. I think this is the HBG one and this is the Shapeways one because of the texture of it, but essentially the same thing. This was a prototype tank. I can't remember what it's called, but there were like 2 of these made, I think. They didn't see combat, but comparatively, I believe this one was actually supposed to be quite large for what it is. It's like a Fiat 2000, I think, or something like that. Anyway, so I believe it's supposed to be actually like a pretty large tank. I don't know exactly the size comparison to a lot of other stuff, but it's supposed to be pretty big, I think. And then, of course, we have the one Italian task force marker, which is really all you're going to need. You're going to need a task, or at least all I need. It's helpful to have an Italian task force marker for this front with the Austrians. And that's Italy. Now that brings us to America. So America was fun to do. Focus. Man, I'm getting all sorts of focus issues. Sorry about that. We got the coaster from HBG, of course. We got our out-of-box infantry. Yeah. Got our out-of-box infantry. I think that sculpt is really cool, personally. Yeah. Artillery, trucks from Shapeways and HBG. There's a Shapeways ones that I got. Liberty trucks from HBG. Where are they? Here. Here we go. Yeah. So that's an HBG one. Yeah. And then these are cavalry I got again from HBG, but I painted these ones. So it's always tricky to find a good paint that matches with the out-of-box colors. This is actually fairly close though. This is NATO green. Tamiya NATO green. Here. Let's see. Of course, there we go. So yeah, Tamiya NATO green. It works pretty well. And then of course we have transport subs, cruisers, dreadnoughts, all the same. Fighters, out of box, the same. And then I got some US bombers. So again, these are from HBG. And then we get to tanks. And now tanks for America is very interesting because there were a lot of, it was the era of prototypes, right? So there were a lot of interesting designs. Yeah. This is like the perfect distance and layer to have focusing issues, I guess. But here's what I got. So in the war, US ended up using just the French Renault tanks. So I got that. I got a few of these. Again, this is an HBG piece. Just a French Renault tank. So that's fairly standard. And then we have the steam wheel tank. Again, another HBG piece that I painted. So this was like a drawing board idea. I don't think they actually made any of these, but I could be completely wrong. Maybe it did get a prototype made. I'm not positive. But that's a steam wheel tank. So that's kind of fun, right? And then my favorite prototype tank, besides the Tsar tank, of course, is the skeleton tank. HBG 3D printed these as well. And they, an American company did make this. It's on display still in Minnesota somewhere, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. But this is a skeleton tank, and I guess the idea, it's like a box, and maybe they thought bullets would go through it or something without hitting people. I don't know exactly, but very interesting idea for a tank. I think some pieces of it were wood. I could be wrong again, but it's very strange design, and it's super cool. It was a little bit of a pain in the butt to paint it from all angles. Again, this is the NATO green, and it works. The NATO green from Tamiya, and it works pretty well. This is fairly close, right? Maybe I'll have some less focusing issues if I go from this angle. But yeah, maybe it's a smidge darker, but I mean the U.S. pieces are a pretty dark color to begin with, so that works pretty well for America. And then of course we have the American Task Force marker. One of these days I will paint this ring and then put it back on here, but for the time being, since there isn't a nation that has black, so I figure I'm like, this is just the darkest color, so that's fine for America. So it does the job. And of course, we have the U.S. flag roundels with the 48 stars, I believe, at this point in time. And that's America. Now, if you thought that's it, no, wait, there's more. We got the Soviets. So if the Russian Revolution occurs, a default Soviet setup happens, and a default White Russian setup happens. Now, this is a coaster that I actually had Madman make this file for me, and then I printed it out and laminated it. So HBG does not sell these, but I made this one with Madman's help. And then most of these are HBG pieces. So we got a few different, I think it's light red and red on HBG's site. Man, I'm having all sorts of focus issues. Light red and red on HBG's site are very similar. They're so similar that I don't care that they're not exactly the same, but differences in sculpts are slight. Or not slight, but the differences in sculpts are cool, but you have more options, but the red is so close that like the light red and red is so close that it doesn't matter too much in my opinion. So this is light red, this is red. So I have both of these. I prefer this piece. This piece is fun too. I got those for variety. And then I got these artillery. I got these Russian artillery from HBG. And then for trucks, HBG sells these in light red, and that was good enough in my book. Now these cavalry, or I have a habit of saying cavalry, it's cavalry. These are just Risk cavalry once again. So just bust out a copy of Risk and poach these from there. And over here, these are some Russian transports. HBG Russian transports I thought were appropriate enough. Russian subs, or Soviet subs. Cruisers, again from HBG, I went with this mold. This one, I can't remember what it's called, but there's a few different cruiser options. And I went with this one because it was closest in size to the 1914 cruisers. And then, of course, we have these battleships. Now, naval units sea units, won't play too much into our game necessarily because of having to focus on this part of the world exactly, but to prevent Allied intervention over here and over here maybe even, but over here specifically, the Soviets will want to, if they're in action, they might want to build some naval units to help protect those coastlines against Allied intervention right there, right? So we got those, and then I got these planes and painted them. Again, this is a Tamiya light red. This is an HBG German fighter, a biplane again. Again, a biplane. A biplane is a biplane in my book. So I got a few of these. Then used the same Russian World War I Russian bombers. This one's a little warped, as is that one, unfortunately. But these ones are good. Yeah, two of mine have a little bit of a warpage issue with them, but anyway. So that's a Soviet bomber, this ludicrously large-sized aircraft. And then We've got a few neutrals here because if the Russian Civil War occurs and Finland is not central power control, Finland becomes a strict neutral. So that's why these guys are set up here. So there's a Finnish control marker. Finland can become a neutral and then receive a starting setup. And then here we are with a few tanks, and I didn't do the Tsar tanks because Tsar is obviously very imperial, so I just went with a few of these ones. Again, I can't remember what this one is called, but it's just a giant box with a small turret on top and a gun in front. And then we have these two task force markers, and then lots and lots of these Soviet roundels, because you got to cover the whole board with them, right? When they're in play. So that is the Soviets. Now here we go with the China factions. So there are two China factions in our game. We have the pro-Allied and we have the pro-Central Powers. You'll see infantry, 3 artillery, and cavalry. I painted these. This is lavender, same color I used to paint Republican Spain units for my BBR variation. These are out-of-box 1940 Chinese pieces, but now they are Central Power Chinese pieces, right? And 3 artillery here. And then these are just HBG cavalry, US color pretty much. The color is close enough. And then we have just enough roundels that they need. Task force marker for each side if they want. And then we have the default China roundels. So basically when the Civil War is going on, the Allied side does not need those roundels. And if the pro-Central Power side, if they win, then China gets united, and then you put those roundels away so that, because the losing faction doesn't come back, so then you can switch to these roundels if they're able to go into other territories, if the pro-Central Power side is able to go into other territories. So it switches over, you take these roundels off the board. You will only ever need roundels to cover all the Chinese territories, the Mongolian territories, and Tibet. You only need a maximum of those many plus what is on the income tracker, and so on and so forth. And then here's a coaster, which is a Manchukuo one, but it was close enough in terms of the color for the matching for this, because that was just what was available. But anyway, so that is our China. So continuing on from there, oh, we have one more. Again, I'll go do this really quick. This is the CSA eventually. Again, this is the pipe dream idea to have the turtle dove variant. So Madman made me this. I printed it out and laminated it. And as you'll see, these are all UK color, normal UK, to us, normal UK color. So 1940 global, UK British pieces, artillery, HBG cavalry, HBG trucks, battleships. These are King George V, technically. Cruisers, out-of-box subs, out-of-box transports, HBG biplanes. They have these in tan, but they rarely have them in stock. And then here's some an alternate U.S. bomber that I painted. It was the tan color. And then for tanks, I just used these because I was lazy and didn't want to paint stuff, and I thought this looked World War I enough-esque. These are just British self-propelled artillery. And then the task force marker, and then all these things. So eventually, hopefully one day, we'll be able to incorporate this. So I'm going to do a part 3 with the other components in a second.